Hello, YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and put together some videos on U.S. issued military watches, wristwatches. I hope you enjoy them, just like I do. A lot of these watches have a lot of history. During the beginning, around the World War II era, U.S. was very involved in the watches and their standards and their specifications. They were very tough. And the watch companies, when they built the watch for the U.S., if they did not pass the required tests, they were not purchased. And we keep in mind, back then they used to buy 200,000 watches, and they were issued. Most of them were issued mainly to U.S. Pilots, Army, Air Corps, Navy pilots, navigators, and anybody who required the use of a specific time equipment or timepiece, as they call it. Nowadays, the U.S. is not as involved as they used to be. Back then, they used to have watchmakers in the companies that they would service these watches. When the watch needed repairs, you would just take it to your company watchmaker, and he would either replace parts, swap parts out from another one that wasn't working, and then he would return it to you. So that requirement is no longer in the U.S. military. What the U.S. military does now is that they let the companies decide how that watch is going to be built, but there are still standards and specifications that the U.S. require when they build them, and they still have to pass tests. But they're not purchasing as many watches. They're actually letting the soldiers purchase what they want to wear in the battlefield. But they still, to this day, they're still purchasing watches. One of the biggest companies now is Marathon, and they still make watches for the U.S. military. How can you recognize what a U.S. issued military watch looks like? Most of them would have the required engravings in the back cover, and they would give you some data and specifications and part numbers and serial numbers of the company that makes it. Okay. At the beginning, most of the companies actually that were building watches for the U.S. knew that they couldn't put their names on the dial. Okay, it was a requirement, but that requirement in the beginning was not as enforced. So you'll see some watches that do have the manufacturer's name on the dial itself. Okay, but as we go along, we'll keep talking about these watches a little bit more. This one here in front, right now, we have the Elgin Caliber 580. This one is 7 jewel watch, size 8.0, and in the back on the inscription, it says U.S. and then it'll have the serial number. Okay, the model was made. This specific model was made in 1944. There was 3 grades made: the 580, which is this one, the 554, and the 539. Later, in the 50s, 1950s, 2 more models were made. The grades were 647 and 685. Now, these watches were produced and procured for U.S. military services. Most of the watches were bought by the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy. U.S. Army used them for their Air Corps, and the U.S. Navy used it mainly for their underwater demolition teams and pilots. The dial, this dial, had a white finish, and it was graduated in minutes with numerals 1 through 5 on one side and 7 through 12. And the seconds were graduated in seconds with 10-second increments indicated by a small numeral. You'll see it on the outside edge. The hour numerals and the hour and minute hands were luminous, while the second hand down here was blued steel. Now, most of the watches that were bought by the U.S. Navy were stamped USN Boo ships, USN Boo ships, and also you'll see on the ones that were bought for the USN for United States Navy Bureau of Ships, you would see two dials on top above the 12. You see two marks. One of them was supposed to indicate whether any condensation had gotten inside the watch itself by turning a different color. Okay. Again, this one is the first one I'm showing you today. It's the Elgin caliber 580, and it's made by Elgin Watch Company. All right, stay tuned. We got some more coming, and I'll be posting them as soon as I can.